So good morning and good evening, depending on where you are. And welcome to the Labyrinth Society's Many Paths, Many Visions podcast with your host, Christiana Brinton. This series theme I call Labyrinth Tales for Sheltering in Place. And my guests and I will be exploring the many ways the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the worldwide labyrinth community, while also calling on us to use labyrinths privately to foster creative care healing solutions. Joining me today are two New Zealanders, Erica Duthie and Struan Ashby of Tape Art New Zealand. Both are artists and visionaries who create fantastical labyrinth installations, combining traditional labyrinth forms with meanders, spirals, and all sorts of other kind of artwork. I've titled this podcast, Bringing the Whimsy into the Walk, Illuminating a Dark Time Through Art, Color, and Design with Tape Art New Zealand. If you are joining us on this GoToMeeting session, please keep your sound muted by making sure the microphone icon in the lower middle of the GoToMeeting control panel has a line through it. This icon and others will appear on your computer screen once you log in. If you call in by phone, you will not see this, of course. You can unmute yourselves and ask questions during the Q&A session at the end of the interview. Find the GoToMeeting invitation posted on the TLS Facebook page, the TLS Facebook Global Group, and on the Labyrinth Society's website on the News Updates page in the What's New column on the right side. So, greetings, Erica and Struan. Welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Same with me.
So it's great to hear your voices. You sound like you're in the next room. You sound so close and you're, oceans away. So it's pretty amazing technology nowadays. So the title of this podcast episode is about the pandemic times we're living through. But you both have been making tape art since the earlier mid-90s, correct? So
that's right.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, about the beginning of your journey together.
We started out, do you want
to? We met at art school. I was studying filmmaking and Erica was studying printmaking. So we collaborated together on a project that Erica was working on. So we met creating art projects. We also an American guy who came over on exchange, and he was drawing with tape, and we combined with him, and we decided to go to the States and start drawing with tape and creating murals in the States, which is fantastic.
He was called Michael Townsend, and I think, like us, someone who had spent a very imaginative childhood, who probably didn't have a strong line between reality and illusion, and just really enjoyed connecting to people. We were very lucky to have our former years kind of cutting our teeth as public artists in America, because it's a place where, although you may not be aware of it, when you leave America, you realize that Americans are really forthcoming and generous and fun to be on the street with, because they'll give you their ideas and they'll give you feedback, and they don't need encouragement to share.
Unlike New Zealanders, which are a lot quieter and reticent and humble, you could say.
I was going to say, use that word, reticent. Reminds me of the British. Yeah, very similar. Well, that's
in
interesting.
Comparison, yes, very much so.
Yeah. And we very quickly developed a manner of working as art students. At the very beginning, we tended to think of the idea that we were able to create kind of a surprise gift in the city. So we'd work all the way through the night and come up with the mural idea, and then we'd quietly drift into the background and watch as people saw it and tried to imagine how it came to be. And we loved that kind of mysterious undercover component. But over time, as we started to observe and grow it ourselves, we discovered that the real fun we had been missing, which was to actually engage with people in the act of making our work and share our processes more openly.
To the point that we would engage them and get ideas, and they would change the mural itself, with their ideas. And Erica is a great portraiture artist, and so she would draw people literally into the work, and they would take roles in the artworks. These were figurative large-scale drawings done in a silhouette style, and so they were, fairly fast to put up in a large-scale mural. And we really love creating narratives and fantasy stories, from very wacky, amazing steampunk things to the everyday. So it was quite a large range of ideas and themes.
We thought we'd mention one particular project just to give your listeners a flavour of how we worked, which we see as being kind of the underpinning of the skills we developed that flew into our ability to be responsive as labyrinth designers. And so, remembering that we've done hundreds and hundreds of these projects over many, many years, this project we're wanting to share was called HESS, and it was part of a residency for the Mayfair Festival of the Arts in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I think it was about 97 or 98. And so we were standing in front of a wall. We noticed that it had a particular architecture, but before we had time to engage very much, we discovered that it was originally a very important landmark in this dying part of Allentown, whereby it was the
department store.
Yeah, and it was a very special department store, and one that there was a great deal of grief and loss and memories and delight that once it had closed left a residue strong enough that we had passerby after passerby after passerby sharing with us memories they had of being in the store.
And so we came up with an idea. There were 9 panels which were, boarded over windows. So we decided to create window displays that went way back into the 1800s. So, the department store probably wasn't quite that old, but we took, flight of imagination. And so we created these 9 panels that went from the past way into the future. So going right from a men's store creating top hats and wonderful tailored clothes, right through to the 50s with surf gear and into modern technology, and then into some very strange futuristic science fiction like technology. So, taking a slice through history into each of these panels that we, improvised each scene for.
And some of them were quite close to history, where we might have a person describing how they had been as an 8-year-old with their grandmother having high tea, or oohing and ahhing over a hoover, and that we would draw the people we're talking about directly onto the walls. But it was quite characteristic of our way of working in that the architecture provided a frame, the social history in this case was the spur for the idea. It shifted and evolved in a way that we couldn't expect, because each gift of a conversation we had, I find when I draw people, it's a little bit like the intimacy of the conversation you have with a hairdresser. The trust of actually having your likeness captured in public is quite high, and that was the really beautiful kind of unexpectedly meaningful conversations that I had that helped to shift and deepen and enrich the kinds of things that we could include in the labyrinth, in the murals themselves. And in each of our iteration projects, be they vertical murals or landscape activated labyrinths, we have a similar way of working in that it might be a chance conversation or something about the physical architecture or the way that people move through a space, or something that might have happened on the day. There's a really wide range of ways that a seed is planted for our ideas to develop. But we're accustomed to having that improv immediacy, whereby we're quick on our feet and enjoy the challenge of evolving and feeding more. And for us, it's not a static thing.
So you've developed this quick response improv pattern and technique over the years, and it sounds like to me, because I know Allentown, Pennsylvania. I have family there. And it was a factory town, and then it dried up and a lot of stores closed. And so I can imagine what you're talking about. But I wanted to go back, first of all, to mention your website. It's www.tapeart-nz.com, Tape Art New Zealand. And you have a bunch of different videos that people can watch on your website that point to some of these installations that you've done. Temporary. That's the other thing. Have all of these this work that you've done, all of these installations, have they all been temporary, or are there some that were are still in existence?
99.9% of them are temporary, so we very much enjoy the idea that they are, transitory, and that is really a part and flavour of how we operate and enjoy operating. We have one permanent labyrinth in the local school and one permanent mural in a local town, which is unusual for us, and we feel slightly odd about having something permanent, but everything else is temporary.
Yeah.
The labyrinths have been designed to be reinstalled, so they are made with various different elements that can be taped down again. The murals, most of them are made out of tape, which are completely gone and removed except for the photographs, which is part of what we do, and the memories. We also developed a process where we created pre-made elements out of recycled materials like PVC, like canvas, plasticized canvas that we recycled, and billboard skin that we tape up as well. So we developed our process into using various other materials that we sometimes can reuse.
But your primary focus is tape. Is it a specific kind of tape that you use for all of these?
Initially, all of the websites looks like websites that are out of date, and that it focuses on the blue linear tape drawing work. Our Facebook page is more up to date, and it shows some of the ways we're using other hardware store type recyclable materials.
Okay.
Of which tape, it does come up as a factor quite regularly, but it's not the only means by which. I think over time we've realized that our connection to the tape component is less strong than our connection to the problem solving, imagination, transformation aspect, which is more open, brief than just using one material.
We use a variety of different tapes. In the past, we've used various different painters tapes, mainly a blue painters tape, and we use a different kind of variety. For our labyrinths, we use duct tape, so that very high quality duct tape that will go into the ground and will last people walking over it and won't leave residue. We're very sensitive to the kinds of tapes that we use for each different kinds of process. Sometimes we use tape also for a stencil process, so we'll put tape down onto canvas kind of material and then paint over top of it and leave an impression of the tape. So it really depends what part of the process and whether we use tape at all. Sometimes our labyrinths don't use any tape except in the installation side of things. It'll just be painted. So there's a whole variety of ways that we've used tape and work away from it and rethink how it could be used.
But I'm saying that if you ever happen to want to find a really good product locally in your country, Sure Tape is the company that we've always found amazing, and they have an excellent clean release painters tape, and they also have a really good range of coloured masking tape that can be put onto surfaces. The painter's tape is good for being able to be removed, but the masking tape has to go down on something that you aren't going to be taking it off.
Uh-huh. And so your collaboration process. So how do your ideas become joint projects? Is this also very much by the skin of your teeth, kind of just at the spur of the moment, depending on what is presented to you, how do you work together to who takes what part of the project when you're doing this? When you're doing each project and you're actually on site involved with it?
I think I think you should answer this question, but I wanted just to put a little thing in beforehand, which was at a surface level, it appears like Struan's doing the practical problem solving and I'm intuitive. Actually, that's not at all the case, because I'm a very practical production person. And well, no, you may not. Okay, I was worried you were going to say that. That's all right. Okay, you keep going then. But I'm just saying we both have very much a mixture of components. But the key thing is that I think, like an iceberg, what you see in the videos and the artwork is about 10% of what is the work. Most of the work goes in on the underpinning that's invisible. Anyway, off you go.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's very much a collaborative process when we're at a wall and we're improvising versus when we're pre-making stuff as well. So it depends on the amount of time that we've got to discuss. It's quite exciting to stand at a wall and, in our earlier projects, we would just sort of riff. We often came up with an idea in 10 minutes or an hour and then started. And that was quite, you had to do something. So you had to trust your instinct. And we kind of knew what would work for a mural visually and to be understood graphically on a wall, what would work compositionally in the space and what would be appropriate to that moment. And that was quite exciting to problem solve very quickly together. And, we would sort of throw ideas around and, it was very collaborative in the way that we approached it. And then more recently, we've had more time to pre-make and research ideas, and that would just give us more time. But it's very much working together. I would say I'd probably do more work on designing the labyrinths recently, but we're very still much in partnership about how to problem solve each project and what ideas would work in the moment, and just throwing ideas around.
So, I mean, practically things like if we were having a scene that needed to have architecture and perspective, I wouldn't go near it because I have not that confidence, and I'm inclining more towards the people side. But in the case of, say, a labyrinth, Struan has a building background. He has a really good sense of space and how to deal with things practically, mathematically. But it is in the way that we critique and negotiate and challenge and work together that gives us the confidence to work both our process in public and take our work into public in a way I don't think I would ever do by myself, because I wouldn't have that assurance that I'd actually thought of where the gaps might be, or I feel like my confidence comes from the concept that our skill sets combined enable us to feel that we can step into a space knowing we'll have people who will have thousands of eyes, thousands of backgrounds looking at something and being able to see holes in it, and us not having that concern, just going, it'll be fine.
I think also as a creative partnership, as Eric had said, there's a small amount that you see on the surface, which is the artwork, and behind the scenes, actually drumming up business and doing websites and doing accountants and doing all that stuff, which is, what we do. We have different skills that are complementary as well, and that's what enables us to work together and go out in public and have the confidence that we can pull it off.
Yeah, there's a 360 quality to your relationship. I mean, it's not just the art, it's the whole package. Yeah.
But I think that the thing we don't often do is reflect in the manner in which something like this opportunity allows. And in some ways, it's fabulous because it gives us a chance to grow and appreciate and reflect and understand. But also it's slightly scary because you realise that we're working within a very narrow margin of possibility. Just because we keep managing to make that little tiny margin work doesn't mean that it's necessarily very wise or very larger window. There's so many factors that go against doing temporary work in public without being able to control the weather and all the dynamics of social space and shared space. It's funny how we've habituated ourselves to doing something which is a very high risk thing and yet feels quite natural to us.
So when did you start making labyrinth related designs and why? How did this come about?
Our very first labyrinth was created in our local railway station, which is a lovely 1930s Art Deco huge building. We were going to go along there and create a mural work, and we were going to work with a friend of ours who's a sound artist, Christine. And looking at the space, we couldn't see any wall space, so we went into this lovely atrium area, and it had lovely acoustics, and it had a perfect space for something on the ground. And it was right beside where all of the commuters rushed through on their daily commute from the trains into town, which was just a few steps away. We thought, what can we put on the ground?
And it was really powerful standing there. It's the capital city. The Beehive is right next door. There's a lot of people in penguin suits, and none of them we were observing were in their body. They were all you could clearly see they were about where they were going, they weren't where they were. And so the space one of the things about being public artists is we're experimenters, you know. We listen, we think, and we go, oh, what would be fun here? What would be interesting? And I think that the thing that came quite strongly to us was, I wonder what would happen if you invited this group to slow down, to take a different journey, and to actually is there any way we could help them be embodied in this space? If we look up, there's an amazing barrel vault ceiling. I wonder if anyone's ever looked up. Let's see what happens. And then the idea of, well, what kind of way could we invite people on a journey in the space? And it just seemed to fall out of the air that let's try a labyrinth.
So we did a little bit of research into labyrinths for the first time, and we did, come up with some designs which were circular, but they also had some spaces for putting sound installations, so speakers in little collections, sort of like driftwood detritus spaces. So it was also, the sound was there to activate the space and get people's attention, because as you're walking through, you wouldn't necessarily be aware that there was something happening over just to your left because it's on the ground, and you wouldn't expect it to be there. So working with Christine, who's a sound artist, she constantly walked through the space and brought sound and attention to the area as we were drawing in there as well. So we were drawing on the ground and subtly activating the space, which is something we sort of do in the murals as well. We're quite sort of subtle, that we're there if you want to see us. We don't, bang our drum and wave a flag. We kind of, are there for the observant and as an open invitation.
And so what happened, which has never happened before, was for the very first time we realized that the most empowering thing we could do in that space was to stop drawing, because normally drawing is the thing that draws attention, even though we are subtle about it, and it means you get this really, it's the kind of people that come and notice, you have the most amazing conversations with, and it's part of the fun side for us. But we realized there was a lot of hesitancy about entering into the labyrinth space. There was a lot of confusion about the possibility of getting stuck. That movie from the 80s, Labyrinth, did so much damage to people's understanding what a labyrinth is.
Yeah.
And so we discovered that if we walked the labyrinth, people came and they felt emboldened to join us. And so we started to see our role as activating the space through our walking through the space, not drawing and enriching the visual space. And in the course of our being with our work, which is normal for us because we stay with our work as the storytellers and share, just to keep the whole thing alive, because liveness is a big part of what we were interested in. We were there to have witness people having their first kiss and talk about it, who came out and hugged random strangers spontaneously. There was a kind of a quality to the way in which people were responding to the invitation to do this walk that was characteristically different from any exchanges or conversations we've had in the 18 years previous. Strong enough that we were really excited, and we were there 5 days. So we were actually participating and evolving and growing this thing in the capital city with thousands of people going by for 5 days. We had a chance to really watch and see what happened and what the function of the labyrinth was, what the invitation was, how it shifted the space, and we were incredibly excited.
So to me, what you're saying is there's a relationship between imagination and healing, almost, that you experienced this with these people walking in some way, whatever they needed, in these very imaginative, and they're not, you look at the images that you have on your website, Struan, they're not typical, quote unquote, labyrinth designs. They're very imaginative. They have offshoots and connections, and yet there is the labyrinth design in the center very often. But it's more fantastical and imaginative than the typical, one circuit one path in 5 circuits, 7 circuits, 11 circuits into the center. So can you talk a little bit that's a relationship between the imagination and the imaginative, the transitory aspect of these creations that you do, and this aspect of people coming out and hugging someone else, or like there was sounds to me like there's a freedom there that wasn't there. People were embodied. People became in their bodies from walking rather than just being in their heads going by and not being in the here and now, not being present.
Yeah, that project was one that people happened upon. A lot of our labyrinths are designed for like festivals, so people were expecting things to be there, but not necessarily a labyrinth, and not necessarily a labyrinth of the kinds that we make. I think the challenge for us is that we're making sort of art hybrid labyrinths, so they're not just a path, they have sort of void spaces or gaps between the paths or around the perimeter of the labyrinth. So there are these spaces to create patterns and ideas and animals and figures and various different thematic things that we can create the sort of fantasy space that you can walk through. So, you know, the challenge is to create a labyrinth that will activate your imagination and invite you in and be exciting as a sort of visual spectacle in a festival event often, but also to, you know, transport you into a different space, as well as, you know, taking you on a journey. So it gives you both the aesthetic experience and everything that a labyrinth will offer. And, you know, we've tried all sorts of different kinds of labyrinth designs, from quite classical circular 5 or 7 circuit labyrinths to turtle labyrinths to labyrinths based on koi pond, and labyrinths that, you know, involve lots of patterns and multicultural iconography. So, you know, it's actually quite exciting to experiment and play with a kind of form of the path and how to mathematically fit that into a space, but then also how to sprinkle amongst it lots of exciting artwork and design that we get excited about as well.
And do people,
I think that,
sorry, do people come,
you go.
do people tell you or talk to you about their experiences in the labyrinth? I mean, you said that they go out and hug people, or you saw that happen, and but, you know, because the pictures that you have, even the videos, I mean, there's nobody sad or sitting there. Even there's really nobody, I don't think anybody even meditating. They're all really involved and walking and you know, and I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's plenty, but I'm wondering if the designs that you create don't provide an outlet for people. I mean, it's a shift in perspective, which helps them, you know, gives them more space. Yeah.
I think that there's a number of layers to this, and one of them comes from something which we've kind of formalized as an understanding. Like someone says, we would like a labyrinth. We go, okay, cool, we'll work through the labyrinth thing and say, but you need to understand that for us, we have a way of working, which means we believe that we are what we, in a Maori, in a local culture here, there's a word called kaitiaki, which is a term that kind of means custodian or carer or host. And for us, we have as a given that we are, in our artwork, in our processes, we've always been space holders. So our role is to make a safe space for people, be it through a workshop or in a labyrinth or in a mural. And that's an active role we take quite seriously. So when we're in a public space, we're inviting people to have a transformation experience or walk into an imaginary space, and we're always there. And so there's kind of an acknowledgement that we're asking people, we're inviting people to actually go somewhere, and that when they've come back, they might need someone. And so we are that someone. We're quite clearly the artist makers. We wear the colours of our work, and we're often sitting or walking the space as kind of human metronomes to keep the pace not too fast if we've got lots of people. But it is in that role that we are recipient of all of the need for hugs or sharing or whatever it might be. And sometimes our work is usually up for hours, so there's times for the contemplative moment where you get the quieter, more emotionally intense walker who may have a sharing that is of a different caliber from the festive, high energy, fun, delight aspect, which is the dominant one in our work. But there's definitely a sense of a process that we understand will happen even in that festival component environment, and that we are there to share. And sometimes it might be they're interested in why we, what were the references to the symbols? Is that actually Thai? Is that about Islam? What are the cultural connections that we've embedded in the visuals? But also it's about how they feel and what they want to share about how they feel. And that's part of a key part of how we understand our role as labyrinth hosts in public space.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes one level of emotion to get through to and walking to get to the other. So it's a process that you're experiencing and watching and holding space for with all these people.
And sometimes it might be the kid that does it 30 times and the parents wait because they understand it's important. What I love about this is that we're getting everybody in the kitchen sink. You're getting people from every walk of life having an opportunity to have this shared experience, people who wouldn't want to be close to someone in their normal life who becomes intimate and shares and smile and helps and slows for an older person, or there's this human kind of intimacy that's forced by the path pattern and a warmth that is embodied by the way we try and create this space, and it really transfers.
It is interesting that we are creating labyrinths for short-term events. So that does change probably the typical experience of labyrinths from something that people expect to go to or experience to something that's a festive atmosphere. Often children will be in amongst them there and possibly running around, and we have to slow them down. But it's lovely to see families and kids and dads putting kids on their shoulders and walking around and experiencing it, and often experiencing labyrinths for the first time. And we're talking to them about what labyrinths mean and why we're doing what we're doing. So it has a really kind of a fun atmosphere. But as Erica said, there is also space in the quieter times for the meditative as well. And a lot of people have different ideas about what a labyrinth is. So it's just lovely to talk to them about where they're coming from.
And we get a lot of. One of my roles that I really enjoy is I tend to walk a labyrinth for a large amount of the time that they're up, and I'm amazed at how energized and relaxed I feel, and how I have this picture of this kind of energy pattern, like a fingerprint of the energy pattern that we leave once we take our work away. And there are places where we might do a new labyrinth every year, and there's an expectation. We've got an audience of critics who might be 11 and 70 who will give us feedback on whether or not they like what we did. And it's really, really neat building that vocabulary in an audience and sharing that process of journeying that we are going on as we play with this form and see what it might be able to manifest.
Have you been given carte blanche, so to speak, from your clients with these installations? I mean, or is there often a theme and then you take it from there, or how do you work with your client? I mean, I'm assuming you're being paid for these installations, so you do have a client that's expecting that is expecting something along the lines of what they're imagining, or it could be the festival that they're holding or whatever. But I'm just wondering.
I think we're very lucky in that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we're very lucky in that the work that we've done over the years, as you say, carte blanche. We have been 99% of the time being given open rein and to do what we like to do, because we've created trust in that what we're doing is not going to be offensive, or it's not going to be inappropriate, and that it's going to, delight people. So very rarely there might be a request from somebody upon a theme, but primarily, as Erica said earlier, we are sort of listeners to the moment and the space, and we're very responsive to what we think would be appropriate. Sometimes we, go with what we're just thinking about at that moment, but generally we're listening into what's appropriate for that time and place, and we are given primarily carte blanche to do what we like. So I think that's very unusual. We're very lucky to have that kind of open brief to do what we like.
In fact, I was at a global mural conference in Chemanis in Canada a few years ago, and I was sitting at a table with all these big ego mural painters who are, very accustomed to, the kind of the bigger players of the mural world, and they were talking about the void spaces, or the kind of, and getting really excited, and I was trying to understand what they were talking about, and what I realized was that every of these artists had sign off from a committee or from a community or from a client to do their work. And you'll see we've done a lot of the frontages of large art museums, including our National Art Museum, and we did that without a sketch.
Wow.
So I think that, public space is contested space, and predominantly it's commercial space. There's very little that happens in a visual form in public space. It's not curated by the client. So we are more, we have had the fortune more of a dance troupe, perhaps, or a singing troupe, and that we've been understood as providing an experience and had a lot of freedom around the content.
I think this is a lot to do with the medium itself, and that it's temporary. It gives you a lot of freedom, and that it's not going to be there permanent. So that gives you a lot of freedom to put something that's going to be up and exciting for a short period of time. And that is the wonderful thing about impermanence, is that you don't have to get lots of sign off, and you don't have to do something that will last indefinitely.
Or have repercussions afterward either to the
right.
Yeah.
Or that could get damaged long term. Could get vandalized.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that we haven't talked about, which I think is just a little on the side, our understandings of things. We used to have a rip down for our murals, and we have a conscious removal process with our labyrinths, that we know there's a huge amount of power in the process of letting go. I mean, when there was the Christchurch earthquake, we were brought in to do work with the understanding that the removal part of our art process would be a very healing part of what we could offer as artists. And so I think that we've got a really odd understanding of the power of the absence of art, the removal of art, the letting go of art, like the letting go of a treasured moment. So it's kind of the end of our process that in some ways we have a better familiarity of the power with. In the case of a labyrinth, the notion that you enter and then you have to exit, and then the kind of imaginary world that you were walking through is gone, it seems to accentuate the intensity in some ways and the power of that experience.
Has this been something that you've experienced during the pandemic, during COVID-19 more too, because of projects, just because of the temperature, the tenure of the world, the emotional.
When we did our celebration of emergence from lockdown with a social distancing bubbles labyrinth in front of the National Art Museum a few months ago, we were very conscious that a number of the people we were talking to had not been in contact with anyone, because unfortunately they were in lockdown by themselves. There was a lot of emotion around them being able to be, even in this labyrinth where you were 2 meters away from people, you were still sharing an action as you walked through the twists and turns of one bubble, and you waited until you could enter into the next bubble. You were still sharing a labyrinthine community, walking and community experience, and it was powerful, and there was a lot of emotion around the way that people responded in that particular invitation to be together in that emergence labyrinth.
I think seeing people being particularly embodied and in their body and together, rather than being virtually connected, which is what a lot of people seem to be, in that period of time and still are. To actually see people together and walking and intermingling and sharing their body space and their journeys is that was particularly telling for that moment.
Another thing I think is just in terms of the embodiment, parallel to us doing what we do, we've always tried to encourage people to also use their bodies and draw or make things. And so be it that we support people to make community labyrinths that they keep and share and use, or we get people and encourage them to use tape to draw and capture what they see and know it in a different way. Our belief is that people can gain a sense of control and a sense of delight and a sense of purpose if they draw and if they make. And so our kind of ethos is to encourage embodied experiences in the process of art making, in the process of being an audience with art.
And being very hands-on and tangible, not using, devices and computers, but, being very physical and, using your hands to rip the tape and using your arms to draw curves and using your body to dance around with the tape in a collaborative mural. It's, very much part of inhabiting space.
So you have this built into each installation where you have the time to allow people who just walk by to become part of the installation?
Yeah. So we're most often we're brought in as artists in residence. So we'll do our own work, we'll facilitate work, and we'll do artist talks. So we're there to share how to do something. We're here to listen. We're here to share the benefits of what we've learned, and we're here to demonstrate what we love doing in a way that enables spaces for people to enter into it, be it through walking on it or wearing the work or being invited to be the models for portraits, whichever way we can find to invite people to participate in sharing the excitement of activating these imaginary invitations.
I think beyond, just using tape, it's actually coming up with lots of inventive ways of using materials and recycled materials. And, we've created lanterns, we've created, workshops that people create lanterns, and workshops that people create things that are installed on windows with brightly coloured light. And we've got a new project coming up.
Using lighting gels that have been no longer needed. So things which people would throw out.
And also using records, old turntable vinyl records, painting on them. We have, a whole myriad of different processes materially that are physical.
Which are about helping to remove barriers so people can more accessibly recognise they too can make art, they can be creative.
And I think you provide as instructors and artists bridges, because I know I'll take a job. Oh yeah, I can draw on that, but then it stops there. I like what else can I do with this? And it seems to me with these installations, you provide an imaginative bridge or many bridges to incorporating a vinyl record or gel into a bigger panorama, bigger scene that you're doing. And so it helps their imagination. It grows their imagination as they are involved in this with you. Is that?
I think there's multiple things as far as, even just seeing us on the street and seeing what's possible with a roll of tape, and that we can draw and imagine something. Even tape is quite non-elitist, so it sort of deconstructs the idea of art being something that is, not available to everybody, that we kind of make the idea of art creation available to everybody. And then also through workshops and other processes, we're able to excite their imagination by getting people to collaborate and, see possibilities.
I think that because essentially I would say that if we had a religion, it would be that art has power. and it's beautiful and it connects people, and it is as this like incredible force for the good. That we're somewhat evangelical about proving it and making sure it's really accessible and possible. And we just kind of absolutely know that it has potential, but so many people have issues around being told they couldn't draw well, or there's a lot of barriers and a lot of mythology around art, and we basically spend our time trying to democratize and make it less precious but not unprecious.
I think, just saying that idea of preciousness as well as putting labyrinths on the ground and putting artwork on the ground is also something that we've had some interesting issues with. That, art is often seen as a precious, permanent thing, but we also create artwork that goes on the ground that we ask people not to stand on, but we can't stop them from doing that. So, this idea of art being on the ground is a really interesting idea in and of itself too, within the labyrinth context.
And this whole idea of being temporary. I mean, it's like the sand art that Denny Dyke does on the Bandon on the Pacific Northwest coast in Oregon. I mean, the temporary aspect of it is very much there. You really get a sense of the fragility of life.
But also, I mean, there's huge beauty in the work he does. And in the case of, those labyrinths you're looking at, like that the weed mat labyrinths where Struan's worked with tape, he's worked for months hand ripping pieces of tape. When he talks about inviting people to walk on the artwork, especially the artwork where he's predominantly made the pieces, for the very first time I was like, I understand why you put gold frames on things, get really snotty, well-dressed, bitchy kind of people at the front to put you off, and big pillars and lots of steps, because I quite like this work to be protected, because I know it took months of painstaking, loving, hand-making work. And Struan was quite cavalier. It's like, yeah, we'll put it down, we won't put edges on, that's no problem. And I was just having kittens watching just a couple of people not initially understanding that this was handmade artwork. And there's a real kind of challenge for us, because we want to bring quality, handmade, beautiful artwork to people and trust them to appreciate and understand what it is. But we're putting it on the ground where people walk on things. So we've had some real practical, emotional challenges around that side of things, because most labyrinths aren't made with a handmade in the manner that we do. And
it's just interesting seeing different people's reactions. Some people immediately know, that it's beautiful and precious, and other people think, well, because it's on the, I don't know what they think. They walk all over it, and it's interesting. I mean, I have learned to let go again in another stage of, okay, we've put a lot of time into it, and it will be partly damaged, but that's the nature of what we're doing here. We need to understand that that's the context.
Yeah, and this whole idea of damage, I mean, even with so-called permanent labyrinths, they get damaged all the time, and
right.
painting labyrinths, I mean, the paint spatters, and we always say it's, the labyrinths that I've created, it's part of the patina, it just becomes part of the patina, becomes part of the energy of the labyrinth.
Right. Yeah, we've actually, the permanent labyrinth down at the school needs repainting. So we're going to head back there in a little time to, touch it up. So yeah, no, you're right.
But I think one of the things I find interesting is, when you have a spotlight on stage and you're like, oh, that's an activated space. I wonder if the singer's going to come up or what's going to happen there. I think what we're doing with these temporary labyrinths is like bringing an intensified spotlight of this strange little wonderful moment invitation into public space. And it's the curious thing is the power of it, the power of that shared walking experience, what it is about people being together embodied in a delightful and whimsical thing. And, I think we have had trust and experience and observed the power of it, partly because we've understood the power of whimsy. Our work has always been very, very whimsical and very, we're serious about the whimsy, but just understanding there is a place for these childlike or fantastical things that that is normal, could be normalized, dressing up and being playful. That's a part of being an adult that we should never have let go of, that we all still need.
Yes, I hear you. And to me, what you also do, and this is another piece of this, the temporary thing, is that you're confronted with, you're not confronted with a tabula rasa when you come to these places. You're confronted with a square that has potholes and grout missing and this, that, and the other thing, and you're creating something that is whimsical, but I remember seeing in your videos, I mean, like if a big pothole becomes a lake, and you take the things that are there and make them a part of the story. And this is the other thing, is this whole thing about story. I mean, to me, your work is very much storytelling. It's visual storytelling. I mean, and everybody can interpret it and make it their own stories, which I think is one of the reasons why everybody looks so happy when they're walking.
I think you're absolutely right about the storytelling. We both have backgrounds in drama and film, and we love creating an imaginary world space, whether it's with figures populating it, drawn in a silhouette style, or whether we invite people to become those figures. It is an entering into an imaginary space and becoming transformed, and partaking of that story, whether it's quite prosaic or whether it's fantastical. And that's the great thing that we love about doing, is setting a stage, being a director, if you like, or a curator of a moment in a place, figuring out what's going to work there.
What's going to make it comfortable, what's going to make it safe, what's going to make it memorable, and what might enable people to think they could do this themselves, and then populate more spaces with more imaginary opportunities for play and delight.
And I would think that it's also at another level very empowering for people, because they're walking into this space that looks a certain way, but what is happening for them is they're creating their own stories as they're walking into the center, or sitting in the center, whatever they're doing, and walking out. Especially now when I would say 99% of the human race feels somewhat disempowered by this pandemic, at loose ends. What I used to do, I can't do anymore, and what I try to do doesn't work. And yet, when you walk into these spaces and you are you're given permission, which you do as you're holding space, you're the caretakers of the space, to create your own story and come out, like I just created a story about, and there's must be a shift in, I would so much love to walk one of your creations, because I can imagine that there must be a shift in
there is.
It doesn't have to be necessarily conscious, but people come out differently than what they went in very much so.
Oh, absolutely. It's lovely, talking to people and seeing how people respond and react, and create their own responses to the spaces. And labyrinths are very much open metaphors, and you bring your own story to it, as you say. And it's empowering to interpret it, what you're engaging in your own way. Some people kind of reject it and sort of, don't like it, and other people just absolutely love it, and, come out with amazing ideas that you'd never thought was there. And, it's fantastic to, that kind of empowering thing. We just love having an open invitation to people to see how they respond to what we provide them. So I think that's probably the exciting thing, is to, see how people respond.
What I think is really interesting is the marriage between the bare bones walking path experience and the thematic invitation to explore an idea. So, for example, the multicultural labyrinths that Struan did, we were invited to do a Christmas labyrinth. We thought in New Zealand, where you don't have snow and It's like, what would be a way to celebrate something that feels appropriate for this time of year?
All the Christmas iconography, it just don't work here, but we're so used to it.
And it was that thing, well, let's own, what is it that we love about Christmas? It's actually coming together. It's that sense of sharing families and a sense of togetherness. And so by researching the symbols of all these different cultures, Struan made this piece that shaped a conversation with the people we were with to talk about feeling included in New Zealand, being immigrants, a sense of belonging. And that was, each of these labyrinths has a different shift. So something really kind of facile and whimsical in contrast might be the koi pond, where we're inviting people to walk on water, and the path is actually trails of water behind the tails of these gorgeous fish. And the kind of conversation we have there, it was really, really fun to hear people laughing and acknowledging that they were actually walking on water. And what did that mean? And, the magic of being in that very still, very kind of being in nature, being in an imaginative natural space. Each of these labyrinth themes shifts the conversation, and you'll have hundreds of conversations around that particular theme.
I think one of our favourite labyrinths or ideas that we've had is when we created Celestia Zelantis, which was a reinterpretation of constellations and stars from our perspective. So rather than a dominant European perspective, we invited a series of poets to come up with their ideas of New Zealand themed constellations, which we then drew and pre-made and then installed within a labyrinth context, and invited people to go, we can create our own ideas for the stars above us. Here is something based on a cicada that is, New Zealand based. Here is a New Zealand story for the stars. You can actually come up with your own ideas. And then we also ran workshops with some local school children who did that very idea themselves and came up with their own constellations. So, telling their own stories for the stars.
With the star map and installing it on the library. And, there was an hour when we had 8-year-olds to 80-year-olds, grandmothers and grandchildren were being given a chance to share what they valued in their stories. And for us, it was a really powerful project about shared ownership and the fact that we all make culture, not just the culture bearers of this fancy beret title of artists. Like, we are all culture makers.
Mm. And speaking of culture, there in New Zealand, have you done any work with the Maoris at all, with the indigenous people in your?
We worked in Flaxmere in a community in Hastings, where we worked with a local group to come up with a koru designed labyrinth. Koru being a spiral motif based on a fern. Thank you. And so we went and we had workshops with local elderly in schools and in the community centre, and everybody created a small kind of patchwork piece out of tape and stencil, and then we kind of mosaicked this whole labyrinth together as a community labyrinth, which then they could keep in their community hall and roll out for special events. That was, a primarily dominant Maori culture, but we've also created Maori theme. There's this Maori New Year called Matariki, where we created a mural on this in downtown Wellington as well, where we, worked with the Maori New Year.
But it's an interesting time in New Zealand, as there are issues around who should share the stories of the Indigenous people, which I think is happening internationally. And for us as Pākehā, understanding that, we view the culture we live in as part of our shared story, but here we have, we're in a position where we need to negotiate and be very sensitive to issues around ownership of
and
Indigenous design and
cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation.
Who gets sign off of what kind of imagery. So it's quite a sensitive issue.
Yes. I mean, we have that here too. I mean, the gathering was, the in-person gathering was supposed to be in Arizona this year, and the whole thing about the Man in the Maze labyrinth and there's all sorts of issues around that, and the petroglyphs, et cetera, et cetera. So we as an organization, TLS as an organization, has to be very careful as well, and not to say, oh yes, we can open up the center, even if it's in the maze, because you have to be able to walk in the center if you're walking in Labyrinth. Well, that's not really the case with their myths and their own stories, and that's, there is that too. So yeah, but their myths, the Maori, there's so much tied to the sea and to the sea creatures, and I was just thinking, what a great uh, basis for creating a fantastical labyrinth, with their myths and stories that they
Well, I think
have.
Struan's Turtle Labyrinth was a really good example of us being extremely inspired by Pacifica Maori, being the notion that as journeyers, you can't get to these islands unless you travel. And so there's a very strong kind of the totem or the understanding of the turtle as a navigator. In this labyrinth series, there was a family of turtles that were swimming together, and you walked through the backs of the turtles between this family group, and that was a really delightful labyrinth that really had a chord, and I think had quite a rich interpretation of some of the local stories, and just
The turtle is a particularly good metaphor for, journeying and navigating by the stars as a mythological creature, and also the idea of returning home. What could be more perfect for a labyrinth creature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the safety, when you're on that turtle shell, or you're surrounded by that turtle shell, you're safe and you're secure and you're home, and there's that sense of that's very much a labyrinthine kind of archetypal connection there. So that's is that on your website? Pictures of that one on your website?
Yeah, I think we've got a link to the video of the Turtle Labyrinth on our video page, plus pictures. Yep.
There's a lot of photos and videos on our Facebook page, which is has a lot more of the labyrinth work at the moment. Okay.
All right, Facebook page. Okay. Yeah. And that's just tape art. What is the Facebook? What is your? If I just look up tape art New Zealand, I'll find it on Facebook.
That's right. Yeah, okay. It's just full words. So tape art, NEWZEALAND. So the whole thing.
Okay. Okay. Great. So what's up and what's in the pipeline for you? Even with COVID, do you have restrictions? Do you have any projects? What might your labyrinth work look like in the near future? Do you have any ideas?
Because a lot of our work is large festivals based, and they often have a 12 to 18 month lead time, very few festivals have had the confidence to actually put the stake in the ground and say, yes, we're going to do it, because there's too many players involved. So a lot of those large projects are still on hold for us. And
we did get an invitation yesterday to go back to our festival that we go to every year, the Wally Christmas Festival, who have been great sponsors of our labyrinths. But even then, it's not guaranteed at all. So yeah, I guess we just sort of trust in what may come next. That we're very fleet-footed in the possibility of what we may do. The labyrinth that we created for the reopening of the National Museum, we strangely were able to do that in about a week, design, create, and paint, and install the entire thing, which I think we don't want to do again, but is possible.
And it was partly because we had started the process of thinking about what would a socially distanced labyrinth look like. And in the Facebook forum, talking to Lars Howlett and other folks in the labyrinth community, we were all playing with the notion of, how would you do this? It's actually a really contradictory notion of getting people to walk together but not have a gap, but have a gap between them that has to be about 2 meters.
Yeah.
So it was quite a fascinating problem-solving challenge.
Yeah, one's coming out. What happens when one's going out and one's coming in, and they're passing like nose to nose? I mean, that's very. The lines are very thin in most, especially if they're just canvas or just a typical shark design. It's you're right on top of one another if there's a large number of people. Yeah,
definitely. But in terms of future forward, we are super committed and excited about seeing where this journey will take us and making more labyrinths. We know that the physical form of the labyrinths for us is completely unknown, and we're accustomed to and excited about that because it'll be in the moment we'll come up with our best ideas. So, we've got a lot of bricks and we've been doing a lot of gardening, and I think we'll probably make a permanent one at home, hopefully, which would be nice to live with. And we'll continue to play and research and be ready for the next opportunity to develop something new and see where it takes us.
Well, you do have a virtual event coming up, the TLS virtual gathering. And you'll be
really looking forward to that.
To be presenting there, which we're really, really excited about, and you'll be able to, unlike this, where we don't have any visuals, you'll be able to share videos and share pictures and let people really ooh and ah over all of your amazing creations. So we're very excited. TLS is very excited to have you participate. So it should be fun. Be fun for everybody. So I think
we're looking forward to that a lot, and we're also going to try and run a little mini workshop and working with tape as well. We'll try and make that work online.
Oh, really?
We're also delighted about the forum. I think that having a loosely held, warm space for all of us who are passionate about getting people together in a shared walk as a worldwide conversation is really powerful, because the interconnections and the kind of the nurturing and enriching that is happening internationally because of the fact that your organisation is there is really, really invaluable.
It means so much to us to be involved with it.
To know we're not alone. I mean, we're on a tiny island in the middle of a massive amount of sea, and we don't feel disconnected, which is wonderful.
Yeah. It is the times we're living in now that we are, because of the technology, we're actually becoming more connected than we were. So having these virtual gatherings and having opportunities for people all over the world to listen and participate and talk and share ideas, and it's just nothing that we had ever expected, nothing that anybody ever expected, but look what's coming out of it. It's pretty neat, pretty exciting, I think. So.
Oh, it's rich, really, really rich. And I mean, in the last, in your walk around what was that? World Labyrinth Day. The conversations, the groups of, there was some young woman who was super excited about making a labyrinth, and you could see people's brains whirring. I mean, our brains were whirring. It was just so wonderful to go, oh yes, I can see how this might happen, and have people generously say, this is my stepping stones. Here's a scaffold. Go out and be your own maker, and let's see what happens. Feed it back to us. We'd love to see how it went. That kind of thing. It was beautiful.
Yeah. That was quite an event, and very exciting, and the ping ponging of ideas was really, really going there. That was it was wonderful. It was, and it was very positive and beneficial for her. It really helped people, like, oh wait, we are connected. That is what this archetype is all about. You walk and really get that you are never not connected. That's an illusion. And so I'm very excited, and thank you so much. There's no one else on with us today, so and we're a little bit over, but if there's anything else you want to share or say, but otherwise we're gonna close this baby down, and you can go on about your day in the middle of the day, which is what it is there, right?
I think we've covered most things really well. Okay. Thank you, Christiana. It was really lovely to be able to share ideas. I think we're really good. We're excited to be part of it.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure sharing this hour with you, and thank you for joining me today, and many continued blessings on your path, and keep us. I'm gonna make sure I get on your Facebook page and check it out, and keep abreast of what you're doing, because I am not gonna miss installation if you come to the United States. That is not going to happen. I don't care where it is. I'm going to go to it. I'll be there.
We did design our labyrinths to be, because we did touring as our starting point and we do international work. When things free up again, we have a pile of labyrinths which we can install and we can put in a box and be on a plane and bring them out. So we hope someday we get to share some of these experiences directly with some of you guys, because it would be nice to meet in person.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with the network that we have, and that keeps growing, the global group is over 9,000 people.
Wow.
We can do that. We can create, just like Clive Johnson. He went from he just carried a labyrinth and went from one place to another all around the United States. And people just said, yeah, come and stay with me, put your labyrinth out, let's have people walk. And it was very much a temporary thing. It was very much a spur of the moment thing. There is a large community here. And so, we'll have to talk about that. We'll have to talk about it. I'm sure you'll talk about it on the global group, or on the labyrinth. There's a bunch of different Facebook pages and groups that you can discuss this with. But we'll come up with something. We'll come up with a multi-city tour or something where you can bring all of your labyrinth tools and kits with you. And
I look forward to that. That sounds like we're starting that journey.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me today. And again, many continued blessings on your path. And I can't wait to hear your presentation at the end of September. Everybody, it's a virtual gathering, September 26th. Go on the TLS website and look it up. There's lots of information up now. And Erica and Struan are going to be one of our presenters. So you'll have an hour with them, and time after we have time after to meet and talk and network and breakout rooms. So it should be really fun. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And have a great day and great rest of your week. And we'll see you soon. Or listen to you and see you soon.
Thanks, Christiana. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very, very welcome. So you've been listening to the Labyrinth Society's Many Paths, Many Visions on GoToMeeting and broadcast by Spreaker with your host, Christiana Brinton. Be sure to check the TLS website, news updates, what's new area, Facebook, global group, and the YouTube page for a list of upcoming dates and guests. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's nothing upcoming. This is it for August, and will be, because I am very involved with helping with the virtual gathering. And so it will be after the virtual gathering in September that we'll hopefully come up with some a new list of guests for October and November and on into the rest of this year and into 2021. So also, if this podcast has piqued your interest in the Labyrinth Society and you'd like more information about membership or the virtual gathering, please go to www.labyrinthsociety.org/membership or /virtual gathering. You can look it up. It's on the portal page as well as in the individual pages under gathering. You can do it very easy to find. So thank you so much, and many blessings, many blessings. Stay well and secure, and may you find what you need on your path through life.